Yo, what's good? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host. And in this episode, we are going to be discussing my top 5 favorite quarterback values in fantasy football drafts for 2024. These are not going to be my top 5 overall quarterbacks, but these are guys who I think are steals in drafts, and they might be worth taking instead of reaching on a Jalen Hurts or a Josh Allen or someone like that, or a CJ Stroud, who we'll talk about later. Instead of reaching on one of those guys earlier in drafts and passing over those elite skill position players that you really need to win a championship, I'm going to give you 5 guys that you can wait on a little bit and that can still help you win a title in 2024. I am recording this episode on August 19th, 2024. It is nighttime, so I will probably be dropping this on August 20th, 2024. Before we get into the episode, please make sure to drop a like if you're watching on YouTube, and make sure to follow or subscribe wherever you are listening. If you want the video podcast, head over to YouTube, Fantasy Football Prodigy. And with that being said, let's get right into my list. My first quarterback value for 2024 is Kyler Murray of the Arizona Cardinals. Not only is he my favorite value at the quarterback position, but he might be my favorite value in all of fantasy drafts. So if you don't take anything else away from this episode, I wanted to start with Kyler because he is the one guy that I want to make sure you hear about if you don't take anything else away from this. I love his ADP. He's going in the 6th or 7th round as the quarterback 9. As we know, mobile quarterbacks are a cheat code in fantasy with the way that scoring works, because you get a point for every 10 yards of rushing, whereas passing, you typically have to throw for 25 yards to get a point. A rushing touchdown is worth 6. A passing touchdown is worth 4 in most leagues. Not only does Kyler Murray run, but he also puts up numbers in the passing game. Last year, in 2023, coming off of an ACL injury on a putrid offense without a true number 1 wide receiver, he was still great for fantasy, finishing as the quarterback 9 in points per game. Because remember, he did miss a chunk of the season to start the year with that ACL injury. In 2024, he is being drafted at where he finished last year in a bad situation, and I believe quarterback 9 is right around his floor. And he also offers high-end quarterback 1 upside with his talent, his rushing ability, and the situation around him. They added a generational wide receiver prospect in the draft in Marvin Harrison Jr. Trey McBride at tight end broke out in 2023, and he should be a valuable target for Kyler. And hopefully, if someone can emerge between Zay Jones, who they brought in free agency, Greg Dortch, who's been there for a while, he's kind of had his moments, or second-year wide receiver Michael Wilson, this offense could explode. This offense in general is just an obvious candidate to bounce back in 2024. And oh yeah, the Cardinals defense projects to stink, which only means more potential passing volume for Kyler Murray, and hopefully some game scripts where they're trailing and have to air it out in the 4th. Kyler Murray is my favorite quarterback value in all of 2024 fantasy football drafts. My next quarterback value in 2024 fantasy football drafts is Jaden Daniels of the Washington Commanders. We just talked about the value of rushing quarterbacks in fantasy football. While mobile guys like Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, and Anthony Richardson are going super early in drafts, and if you draft them, you're going to have to pass up on top running back and wide receiver options, you can get Jaden Daniels in the 9th or 10th round as the quarterback 12 off the board, which is just an absolute steal. At that point, even if he doesn't pan out for fantasy, you can just cut him without having invested really anything into him, and your team won't really suffer. At that ADP, though, he almost can't bust without getting benched or getting injured, strictly because he will almost certainly be relevant for fantasy on his rushing alone. The risk of being an unknown rookie is baked into his ADP, but I believe he's being drafted at his floor as the quarterback 12. If he does outperform expectations, however, he becomes an absolute league winner. Jaden Daniels, a great late round steal at the quarterback position. Moving on to my third quarterback value for 2024 fantasy football drafts, Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. Speaking of Jaden Daniels, Jared Goff is a great guy to pair with a player like Jaden Daniels. Goff does not offer that, or golfer, should I say? Anyways, he doesn't offer rushing upside like Jaden Daniels does. But he has the next best thing, a great offense and great weapons around him. After finishing as the quarterback 7 in 2023, and admittedly he was a quarterback 15 in points per game, Goff is often going in the double-digit rounds as the quarterback 13 off the board. Goff is not an every week starter, so if you draft a guy like Jaden Daniels late, your hope is he develops into a guy that you can plug and play every week who's going to run the ball and be a league winner. Jared Goff is not that guy. Goff is not an every week starter, but the good thing about him is you usually know when to start him and when to sit him. At home, in a dome, that rhymed, Jared Goff was a monster in 2023. I have his splits pulled up here. In 8 games, he put up 2,240 yards, 70% completion percentage, had a 19-6 touchdown to interception ratio, 280 yards a game. His overall rating was 107.9. I got these from StatMuse. So just an overall picture into how he played. 107.9 was his rating. Those were his home splits. On the road, it was a little bit worse. 64.8% completion percentage, 2,335 yards. And this is in 9 games compared to 8. So he threw for more overall yards, but his yards per game was 259.4 compared to 280 at home. At home, he threw that 19-6 touchdown to interception ratio. On the road, it was 11-6. His overall rating was 89.4. So, long story short, he played much better at home than on the road. Luckily, in 2024, Jared Goff's first 4 weeks of the season before the Lions' Week 5 bye sets up perfectly for him to get off to a hot start. Week 1, Rams at home. They did lose Aaron Donald, who's one of the best defensive players of all time. Their defense might struggle. Week 2, they get the Buccaneers at home. Love that. Week 3, they're on the road, but it is against a bad Cardinals defense in a dome. They play in a dome, right? In Arizona? Or do they have a retractable roof? I think they're in a dome. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. Week 4, they're back at home against the Seattle Seahawks, another defense that projects to not be that great. Again, it's hard to know. Things change, but doesn't project to be a great defense. With weapons like Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, and then Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery out of the backfield, and then maybe even hopefully the emergence of Jameson Williams that we're still waiting for. With all those weapons around him, he should get off to a hot start, which makes him a great option to pair with a young upside guy like Jaden Daniels or even Will Levis way later in drafts. After that bye week, you can decide whether you want to keep him on the roster as a streaming option guy that you play in the right matchup, or you can even try to trade high on him and get some value in return. Next quarterback on the list, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers is one of my favorite quarterback values in all of 2024 fantasy drafts. He finished 2023 as the quarterback 5 overall, and yet he's being drafted in the 6th or 7th round as the quarterback 8. He sat for a few years behind Aaron Rodgers, so 2023 was his first year as being the true starter, and he looked great. He is more of a passing threat than a runner, but he's not a 0 on the ground. He does offer a little bit of running potential, and he ran for 250 yards and 4 touchdowns in 2023 while throwing for over 4,000 yards with 32 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. The reason that I love Jordan as a value, no pun intended there, is you take a look at a guy like CJ Stroud. CJ Stroud is another young pocket passer on a great offense with awesome weapons around him. But Stroud is going way earlier in the 4th or 5th round as a quarterback 5, which adds a ton of risk to drafting him. It means you have to pass up on some elite skill position players to get him. Like Jordan Love, CJ Stroud also had just over 4,000 yards. He only threw for 23 touchdowns to 5 interceptions. While I and most people, I feel like in the fantasy community, expect those numbers to go up, and they saw that he's a good player, and they added Stephon Diggs, Stroud is set up to have a great year. But while that's all true, the draft cost of CJ Stroud is just too high for me when there's guys like Jordan Love or this next guy that we're going to talk about on the list available rounds later, and they offer similar potential. Jordan Love already did what we are hoping CJ Stroud does. CJ Stroud has to level up to meet that value, and he has to do it in a big way, being drafted that early. Whereas Jordan Love, you can get him a few rounds later, and if they finish this season around the same ranking, I would not be surprised. In a vacuum, I'd probably rather have Stroud, but at that ADP, you got to go Jordan Love. And before we go, I got one more for you. Joe Burrow of the Cincinnati Bengals, another pocket passer. In fantasy, you need non-mobile quarterbacks to throw for well over 4,000 yards and over 30 touchdowns to be real difference makers for fantasy. That is something that Joe Burrow has done multiple times or been on pace to do when healthy in the past. 2023 was rough for Burrow, but he started the year off with a calf injury from training camp, and he finished the year on the sideline with a wrist injury. However, we saw the real Joe Burrow for a few games between injuries, and he was awesome, just like he always is when he's healthy. From weeks 5 to 10, Joe Burrow was the quarterback 4 in points per game, averaging over 20 points per game. Barring health, with weapons around him like Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Joe Burrow is a steal in the 5th or 6th round as the quarterback 7 off the board in 2024 fantasy drafts. All right, guys. That was a really quick list right there. I hope that helped. Try to keep these episodes a little bit shorter for you guys. But yeah, those are my top 5 quarterback values in 2024 fantasy football drafts. I hope you enjoyed the content. Make sure to comment below if you're listening or watching somewhere where you can comment who your favorite quarterback values are. Thank you for watching or listening. Make sure to follow or subscribe wherever that may be. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Peace.